Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Chess with Arsalan. If you're looking for a game that represents a great example of a positional exchange sacrifice, this is a game for you. This game was played between Rustam Kasimdzhanov with white pieces against Garry Kasparov with black, and this was actually played in the end of Kasparov's career in the last tournament that he played in Linares 2005. So Kasimdzhanov with the white pieces played d4. We are going to join the game after move 16, uh, and we are not going to spend too much time on the opening because uh, it requires a great deal of time to analyze this position. But this position was actually quite popular in those times. And here after knight f3, Kasparov played bishop e7. And before we continue, let's talk a little bit about the position. In this position, if black manages to castle kingside, then he will have a good position because there's a majority of the pawns in the queen side, 3 against 2. This is one advantage for black. White's bishop on c2 is actually blocked behind this pawn, so it's controlling nothing along this diagonal. And black can actually easily control the d file with moves like rook to d8. Adding to that, the pawn on d4 is hanging actually. 1, 2, and 3 forces are attacking the pawn on e4, while only 2 are defending the knight on c3 and bishop on e2 on c2. So in this position, black has a slight advantage, not a great advantage, but it's a very small advantage that black has in this position. So in response, white played knight g5, which is a multi-purpose move. It's first of all defending the pawn, and the second is preparing to play f4. And if black's king stays in the center, this opening of the f file will be very dangerous for black. And the third point is actually with this move, white, of course in his own imagination, is preventing black from going castle kingside. Why? Because when black goes castle kingside, the rook will wind up on f1. And in that case, the tactics like bishop takes c5, bishop takes c5, and knight e6, forking the rook on f1, on f8, and queen on c7 will be possible. And these kind of tactics are not difficult for players in caliber of Kasparov, difficult to see. So what was Kasparov's reaction to this move? He castled. He allowed the exchange to be taken. So if white doesn't take the exchange and doesn't play bishop takes c5, the knight on g5 is actually loosely played. It's not doing anything on g5. That's why, positionally speaking, white is technically forced to play bishop takes c5. So bishop takes c5 and knight e6, forking the rook on f8 and queen on c5. Queen came to b6, and here black took on f8. And after rook takes f8, we reach to this position, which requires a little bit of explanation. So first of all, let's talk about the king side of white. The white's king side is actually under heavy pressure because queen and bishop on this diagonal are forming a battery that is controlling this diagonal very well. Rook is also attacking f2 square and f2 pawn, and the rook on f1 is not actually able to move at the moment, or probably in the near future, because it's tied to defend of the f2 pawn. So this is the first point. If black in the game manages to play knight g4 or knight g4, it's not possible now because of g4 being attacked by the queen. But if black manages to play knight g4, at some point white will be forced to play something like f3, which gives excellent controls of f2, e3, d4, c5, and b6, all the squares, all the dark squares along this diagonal to the black. So this would be black's long-term idea on the king side. But this is not the only thing that black has in hand. Black can also play on the queen side by pushing the b4 pawn, but not immediately, because if black pushes the b pawn immediately, then the knight a4 can pop up and it forks the bishop on c5 and queen on b6. So preparing for that, black will have to play something like queen to e6, bishop to d4, and only then play b4 and try to mobilize his queen side pawn majority. So this is the overall plans of the black and what black has in this position. White has an inactive rook on a1, which he cannot successfully active, because if white play a4, if white plays a4 and then tries to open up the a file by moves like a takes b5 and a takes b5, yes, the a file is open, but there is nothing along this file that white can white can attack to. And the same story goes for the d file. There is nothing along the d file that white can attack. Adding to that all the entrance squares, d5, d6, d7, d7, and d8 are being well controlled by black's pieces. So basically, the rook on e1 is not worth a damn. So after rook to f8, Kasparov didn't have to wait long for white and for himself to execute his attacks. Here, Kasimdzhanov went wrong immediately. He played knight d5 with a very good plan, but a very wrong execution. Because what is the knight d5 plan? Knight d5 plan, knight d5's plan is to create a passed pawn after exchanging on d5, and this passed pawn on d5 actually will give enough counterplay to white that is enough to oppose black's play, black's extensive play on both sides. Furthermore, if the knight on d5 is exchanged, then this diagonal will be open for the bishop on c2, which is doing nothing at the moment. So this is the overall plan, but this move at this moment was wrong. Why? Because after bishop takes d5, e takes d5. Now, yes, white has a passed pawn on d4, on d5, but black has even more dangerous passed pawn on e4. Because why we are calling this a passed pawn? Because now bishop f2 is possible, and Kasparov did that move. And you cannot take this bishop, because if you take on f2 after knight g4 attacking the rook on f2, then this position will be very difficult. Because for example, if black takes on g4, then after queen takes f2 and king h1, queen f8 is checkmate, so you cannot touch the bishop on f2. That's why white played king h1, and here, as you can see, the pawn on e4 is now a passed pawn, and it's planning to black is planning to play e3, supporting the bishop on f2 and create a very dangerous passed pawn on e5. So here white played queen e2. White's idea is to play something like rook to f1 and try to advance this passed pawn. So after queen e2, black played e3. Now the bishop on f2 is cemented, and rook to f2 d1 was played. And here an excellent move by Kasparov. Here Kasparov played queen to d6. And this is actually very good move, because if black does not play this move, then white in the next turn will play d6, and after that bishop f5, and this passed pawn actually gives enough counterplay to white so he can survive the position. That's why after rook f to d1, in this position, Kasparov played queen to d6. He stopped this pawn from advancing, and now a couple of other ideas are actually showing up. The first one is that if black manages to place knight h5 and then uh, knight h5, which is impossible at the moment because h5 is being supported by the queen on e2, then here black can think about ideas like playing knight g3 check, sacrificing the knight, and after h takes, queen to h6, which will lead to the mate. Or after knight h5, playing knight f4, kicking the queen from e2 and trying to advance this pawn on e3 actually further. So these are ideas that are actually started to shine and started to blink in the position. So here white played a4. He's trying to open up the a file or join the rook for the defense along the third rank. And here another excellent move by Kasparov. He played g6, and now h5 is available for knight because it's now being supported by the pawn on g3. So a takes b5, a takes b5, and here white played g3, eliminating this plan with knight h5 and knight f4, kicking the queen away, because now simply black cannot play knight f4 because of the pawn on g3. So knight h5 was played anyway. Kasparov is a stubborn person. And here actually the danger of the white's position starts to show itself, because white has ideas like taking on g3 check, and after taking on g3 queen takes, and mating ideas like queen h3 started to show itself. And for example, if white tries to defend this plan with queen f1, then queen h4, king g2, e2, sacrificing the passed pawn. You cannot take on f2 because of rook takes, so you have to take on e2, and after that queen g3 check, king h1, and queen h3 is checkmate. So these are the ideas that exist in the position and shows that the g3 square needs protection. That's why here white played queen g4. White played queen g4 and now is protecting the g3 square. But there is another plan into this move. White is trying to play queen e6, forcing exchange of queen, which relieves some pressure from white's position and makes its game a little bit easier. But Kasparov played bishop takes g3 anyways. And you cannot play queen e6 right now because after taking on e6, e2 will be winning, attacking the rook on d1. And after taking on g3, taking on d1, knight takes g3, and after king g2, knight comes back to h5. And in this endgame, black has 4 pawns against 1. This pawn is a gunner. He's going to go. Black is ready to play knight f4, 4 king, the king and pawn on e6. You cannot simply defend it, so you will have to push it. Then the rook comes behind, and then king joins, and this pawn on e6, eventually on e7, will be lost. So this is a winning endgame for black. That's why after bishop takes g3, white took on h3, and now knight takes g3, check. And there are 2 squares that are available for the king, either on g2 or g1. In the game, Kasimdzhanov played king to g2. Let's see what happens if white plays king to g1. In this case, black can play e2, attacking the rook on d1, rook to e1, queen to c5 check, king h2, queen to f2 check, king h3, and after knight h5, this is a disastrous position for white. And there are lots of ideas, for example, rook to f3 check, knight to f4 check, and this king will be mated in a short term. So after knight takes g3, White played king g2, rook f2 check came, knight h3. Again, knight g1 is lost because knight e2 check, and after king h1, queen h2 mate. That's why after rook f2, Kasimdzhanov played king h3, knight f5. The threat is mate on h2, so rook h1. And here another excellent move by Kasparov. He played h5 in this position. And because the queen has to stay on the g file, because if black leaves the g file, then queen g3 will be checkmate. Here he played queen takes g6. If he plays queen g5, after rook f3, king g2, rook to g3, and the queen on g5 will be lost. So that's why after h5, here Kasimdzhanov played king takes g6, and after king takes, rook to g1, taking on g1, and after rook takes g1, king to f7, and here Kasimdzhanov resigned. This is the lost endgame. There's a 1, 2, 3, 4 pawns against 1 and 2. Again, pawn on d5 is a gunner because it will have to sacrifice itself. The bishop on c2 is under attack. This is a very dangerous pawn. The king is a little bit exposed and is still under attack. This is a disastrous position for white. That's why white resigned here. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed to my channel, subscribe, hit the bell button, and wait for the next video. Goodbye.